She is a narrated fiction story created for discussion and entertainment purposes.
Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. Alex never wanted trouble. All he wanted was peace on his own private land, far from HOA politics. But when Karen, the new HOA president, set her sights on his property, things took a dangerous turn. What started as petty harassment soon escalated into trespassing, threats, and even violence. But Karen made one fatal mistake. She thought Alex would back down. Alex had always valued his independence. He and his wife Sarah had moved to their dream home 3 years ago, a beautiful secluded property just outside a suburban neighborhood in Texas. The land stretched for several acres, surrounded by tall trees, and had a newly installed security fence to ensure privacy. The best part? It wasn't part of any homeowners association. Unlike the neighboring HOA-controlled community, Alex's land was entirely private, free from arbitrary rules, monthly fees, and self-important committee members. But that was before Karen arrived. Karen had recently been elected as the new president of the HOA, and she took her role far more seriously than any rational person should. She wasn't just enforcing the rules within the HOA community, she was expanding her reach, believing she had the power to dictate how things should be run beyond the association's actual jurisdiction. And unfortunately, she had set her sights on Alex's property. The first encounter happened one crisp morning when Alex was outside installing a new private property no trespassing sign on his gate. He had barely finished hammering it into place when he heard the unmistakable sound of someone clearing their throat loudly behind him. Turning around, he was met with the sight of Karen, standing with her arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her nose, and an expression of pure condescension plastered across her face. "Excuse me, but I need to have a word with you," she announced, as if addressing a misbehaving child. Alex sighed inwardly. He had heard rumors from some of the HOA residents that their new president was overbearing, but he had hoped to avoid any direct interaction. Apparently, that wasn't going to happen. "What can I do for you?" he asked, keeping his tone polite but firm. Karen wasted no time. "This fence of yours, it's an eyesore. It disrupts the aesthetic harmony of our community, and the HOA has decided it needs to come down." She gestured dramatically at the gate, as if it were some monstrous structure blocking an entrance to paradise. Alex blinked. "Excuse me, this is my land. I don't live in the HOA." Karen scoffed. "That may be technically true, but your property borders our community, and your choices affect our residents. We've all been using this open land for years. It's practically an extension of the neighborhood. And as HOA president, I have to ensure that the standards of our community are upheld." Now Alex was getting irritated. First of all, this land was never public access. Just because the previous owner didn't put up a fence doesn't mean it belongs to the HOA. Second, you don't have any authority over me or my property. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't think you understand how things work here. The HOA has certain expectations. We can file complaints with the county. We can make things very difficult for you if you choose to be stubborn." Alex couldn't help but chuckle at her audacity. "You can try whatever you want, Karen, but at the end of the day, my property isn't under your control, and I will keep my fence exactly where it is." Karen's face flushed red. She took a step forward as if to intimidate him, but Alex didn't budge. After a tense pause, she let out a frustrated sigh. "Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you." She turned on her heel and stormed back toward the HOA neighborhood, her heels clicking furiously against the pavement. Alex shook his head, thinking that would be the end of it. He had no idea just how far Karen was willing to go. Alex had hoped that Karen's ridiculous demands would end with their first confrontation. He assumed that once she realized she had no actual authority over his land, she would back off and focus on enforcing her unnecessary rules within the HOA's jurisdiction. But Karen wasn't the kind of person to take no for an answer, especially when she believed she was entitled to something. The next afternoon, while Alex was in his home office finishing up some work, an alert popped up on his phone from his security cameras. He clicked on the notification and was immediately met with an infuriating sight. Karen had let herself onto his property, striding around with the arrogance of a queen inspecting her kingdom. She wasn't alone either. Two other HOA board members, one of them a tall, wiry man in a polo shirt, and the other a short, stocky woman clutching a clipboard, followed closely behind her. Alex watched, stunned, as Karen examined his backyard, pointing at different things as if conducting an official inspection. He could see her lips moving on the video feed, her hands gesturing dramatically toward his fence, his garden, even his patio furniture. That was it. Alex grabbed his phone, stormed outside, and slammed the door behind him. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded, making his way toward them. Karen barely acknowledged his anger. Instead, she turned to her two companions and spoke loudly enough for Alex to hear. "As you can see, the homeowner refuses to comply with our community's aesthetic guidelines. This fence is completely unacceptable, and this entire backyard setup is a violation of HOA landscaping policies." Alex could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Are you seriously pretending you have jurisdiction here?" Karen turned to him with an infuriatingly smug expression. "Mr. Alex, I have given you ample warning. This property has long been accessible to our community, and we will not allow you to ruin the harmony of our neighborhood. If you refuse to comply, the HOA will be forced to take action." Alex felt his blood boil. "Get off my land, right now." The man in the polo shirt, clearly emboldened by Karen's self-importance, stepped forward with crossed arms. "There's no need to be hostile. The HOA is within its rights to assess the situation and determine necessary corrections. This property affects the entire community, and you are acting like an outsider." Alex's patience had reached its limit. "I am an outsider. This land is not part of your HOA. I don't care how long your residents have been wandering through it. It was never yours to begin with." Karen rolled her eyes, unimpressed by his outrage. "You're being incredibly difficult, Mr. Alex. The HOA is simply ensuring that our neighborhood maintains its high standards. If you're unwilling to listen to reason, I will have no choice but to escalate the matter." Alex pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. "Oh, don't worry. I'm escalating it right now." Karen frowned. "What do you—" Her face paled as police sirens cut through the quiet suburban afternoon. Within minutes, two patrol cars pulled up near Alex's front gate, their lights flashing. Karen and her board members exchanged nervous glances as uniformed officers stepped out and approached. "What seems to be the problem?" one of the officers asked, looking between Alex and the unwelcome trespassers. Alex folded his arms. "These people have entered my property without permission and refused to leave. I have security footage to prove it." Karen's confidence wavered, but she quickly regained her composure. "Officer, this is all just a misunderstanding. This man's property has always been open to the community. He is trying to restrict access to an area that our residents have been using for years." The officer gave her a long, unimpressed look. "Ma'am, are you saying that you willingly entered this private property without the owner's consent?" Karen stiffened. I was simply performing my duty as HOA president." The officer turned to Alex. "You said you have security footage?" Alex nodded and handed over his phone, showing the video of Karen and her board members casually strolling into his yard like they owned the place. The officer sighed, rubbing his temples. "Ma'am, you do realize this is trespassing?" Karen's face twisted in frustration. "Officer, you don't understand. This isn't just about property lines. It's about preserving the character of our community." The officer wasn't having any of it. He gestured toward the street. "I suggest you and your associates leave this property immediately before this situation escalates further." Karen looked like she wanted to argue, but she wasn't foolish enough to push her luck with the police. She turned to Alex, eyes blazing with hatred. "You're making a big mistake." Alex smirked. "No, Karen. You made the mistake of thinking you could control something that was never yours." With that, the officer escorted Karen and her board members off Alex's property. But as she disappeared down the street, Alex knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat. She was already plotting her next move. Alex knew Karen wouldn't back down easily. The police had sent her and her board members packing, but her last words still lingered in his mind. "You're making a big mistake." She wasn't just going to walk away from this. If anything, being publicly embarrassed only made her more determined. 2 days later, his suspicions were confirmed. While working in his garage, Alex noticed a black SUV pulling up to his front gate. The vehicle had no official markings, but the two men who stepped out looked every bit like hired muscle. Both were dressed in black tactical boots, matching polos with the HOA emblem, and utility belts that made them look like wannabe law enforcement. Alex sighed, wiping his hands on a rag as he stepped out to greet them. "Gentlemen, can I help you?" he asked, already guessing why they were there. The taller of the two, a broad-shouldered man with sunglasses and a buzz cut, stepped forward, speaking in a low, authoritative tone. "Sir, we're here on behalf of the HOA. We've received multiple complaints about your property. It seems you're causing unnecessary disruptions to the neighborhood. We need to talk about resolving this peacefully." Alex raised an eyebrow. "By resolving, you mean what exactly? Letting Karen and her board trample all over my property?" The second man, stockier with a bald head and a thick neck, crossed his arms. "Look, Mr. Alex, we're trying to keep things civil here. The HOA has been more than patient, but you're making it difficult. People in the community don't feel safe with all this tension. We're just here to ask you to reconsider." Alex laughed dryly. "That's interesting, because I don't recall ever agreeing to be part of your HOA. And last time I checked, people feeling uncomfortable isn't a legal reason for you to harass a private citizen." The taller man took a step closer, attempting to loom over Alex. His voice dropped to a more threatening tone. "Listen, we don't want any trouble, but we have a job to do, and our job is to keep the neighborhood running smoothly. If that means handling problems the old-fashioned way, well, sometimes that's necessary." Alex felt his pulse quicken. This wasn't just an intimidation tactic anymore. They were outright threatening him. He resisted the urge to clench his fists, keeping his posture relaxed. "Are you threatening me?" he asked, pulling his phone from his pocket and subtly pressing the record button. The bald man smirked, tilting his head. "No one's threatening anyone. We're just having a conversation, neighbor to neighbor." Alex played along. "Right. And what happens if I say no? What if I tell you to get the hell off my land?" The taller man let out a dramatic sigh. "That would be unfortunate. The HOA might have to take further action. You might find it difficult living here if the whole community is against you." Alex exhaled through his nose, nodding slowly. "I see. Well, in that case, I have just one thing to say to you guys." The men waited, their smug expressions barely concealed. Alex smiled. "Get office my property." The taller man's jaw tightened. "That's really the stance you want to take, huh?" Alex took a deliberate step forward, his voice unwavering. "Yes, now leave before I call the police. Again." For a brief moment, the two men stood there, sizing him up. Then the bald one let out an amused chuckle, shaking his head. "All right, tough guy, have it your way, but don't be surprised if things get complicated." Without another word, they turned and walked back to their SUV. The taller one stared Alex down as he climbed into the driver's seat, his knuckles turning white on the steering wheel. As they drove away, Alex felt the anger burning in his chest. They had just openly threatened him on his own land. He took out his phone and saved the recording. If Karen thought she could intimidate him with a couple of HOA thugs, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. Alex knew that Karen wasn't the type to give up easily. The veiled threats from her so-called HOA security only confirmed what he suspected. She was escalating things, and it was only a matter of time before she made another move. He didn't have to wait long. The very next evening, as Alex stepped outside to check the locks on his gate, the same black SUV from before rolled up once again. This time, the two security goons didn't bother with pleasantries. They climbed out of the car, their posture more aggressive than before. The taller man cracked his knuckles, while the bald one rolled his shoulders, loosening up like he was preparing for a fight. "Evening, neighbor," the bald one sneered. "We figured we'd stop by and see if you've had a change of heart." Alex clenched his jaw. He had no intention of backing down. "I told you already, get off my property. I don't answer to the HOA." The taller man shook his head, stepping forward. "See, that's a problem. Karen ain't happy, and she wants us to make sure you listen this time." Before Alex could react, the bald one lunged forward and shoved him hard. Alex stumbled back, but he wasn't about to be pushed around. Years of military training had conditioned him to react fast. As the bald man swung at him, Alex ducked, then came up with a brutal right hook to the ribs. The man let out a grunt, staggering back from the unexpected blow. The taller one didn't wait. He charged, trying to grab Alex by the collar, but Alex twisted away and landed a sharp elbow strike to the man's chin, sending him reeling backward. Just as Alex was about to regain control of the situation, the bald man recovered and tackled him, slamming both of them into the dirt. They struggled, rolling across the ground, trading punches as the taller man regained his balance and moved in for another strike. Inside the house, Sarah heard the commotion. She ran to the window, her eyes widening in horror as she saw her husband being attacked. Without hesitation, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. "Help! My husband is being assaulted on our property!" she cried into the receiver, her voice shaking. Meanwhile, outside, Alex was holding his own, but the two men were relentless. The bald one managed to land a solid hit to Alex's ribs, but Alex retaliated by grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it sharply, making him yelp in pain. The taller man tried again, but Alex was ready. He ducked under a wild punch and drove his knee into the man's stomach, making him double over. The bald guy, realizing the fight wasn't going in their favor, barked out, "Screw this! Let's go!" As the two men stumbled back toward their SUV, the sound of police sirens pierced the air. Sarah stood at the front porch, her face pale but determined, as she watched the red and blue lights flood their driveway. Alex, breathing hard, wiped blood from his lip as the two goons froze in place, realizing they had nowhere to run. This time, it wasn't just trespassing. They had just committed assault, and the police were more than ready to deal with them. The police didn't hesitate in arresting the two thugs. After reviewing the security footage, which captured the entire attack, the officers slapped cuffs on both men and charged them with assault and trespassing. But the real bombshell came when one of them, desperate to save himself from serious jail time, flipped on Karen. During questioning, the bald thug cracked. He admitted that Karen personally ordered them to persuade Alex into complying with the HOA's demands. She had told them that a little intimidation never hurt anyone, and that Alex needed to be taught a lesson. That admission was all the prosecutor needed to build a strong case against her. Within 2 weeks, Karen was served with a lawsuit. Alex wasn't just pressing criminal charges, he was also suing her for damages, legal fees, and emotional distress. On top of that, his lawyer filed a restraining order, ensuring that Karen couldn't come within 500 feet of him or his property. The trial date was set, and when the day finally arrived, Karen walked into the courthouse with her nose in the air, wearing an expensive suit, and her usual smug expression. She was flanked by an attorney provided by the HOA, but it was clear from her posture that she still believed she was untouchable. She wasn't just about to lose, she was about to be humiliated in front of everyone. The prosecutor wasted no time laying out the charges: trespassing, criminal intimidation, orchestrating an assault, abusing her authority as HOA president. Karen's lawyer tried to argue that the security guards acted on their own, but then came the security footage. The courtroom fell dead silent as they watched Karen's goons threatening Alex, trying to force him to comply, and ultimately attacking him. Then the final blow, the confession from her own hired thug. The bald security guard sat on the witness stand, visibly nervous, but when the prosecutor asked him if Karen had ordered the attack, he nodded stiffly. "Yes," he muttered. "She told us to scare him. She said if we didn't, we'd be fired from HOA security." Karen's face turned ghostly white. When it was her turn to testify, Karen tried everything. She claimed she was being harassed by Alex. The police reports and security footage proved that was a lie. She insisted that the land had always been part of the community. Alex's deed, dating back decades, crushed that claim. She blamed the HOA board, saying she was following their guidance. Several HOA members testified that they had never authorized her actions. Each time she tried to lie, the prosecutor shut her down with evidence. When Alex took the witness stand, he spoke clearly and calmly, detailing how Karen had ignored the police's warnings and continued to harass him, how she sent unlicensed thugs to intimidate him on his own property, how the situation escalated into violence, all because she refused to accept that she had no authority over his land. His lawyer then submitted the financial damages he had suffered, repairs to his fence, medical bills from the fight, and legal fees that Karen had forced him to spend defending himself. The amount totaled over $120,000. Karen was fuming in her seat, but the judge wasn't done yet. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was full of disapproval. Mr. Alex, I commend you for handling this situation as rationally as possible despite the clear harassment you suffered. He turned his gaze to Karen. As for you, Miss Karen, your abuse of power is beyond unacceptable. You do not have authority over private land, and your reckless actions have endangered not only yourself, but your entire HOA. Then came the final ruling. Karen was found guilty on charges of trespassing, conspiracy to commit assault, and harassment. She was fined $50,000 personally for her actions. The HOA was ordered to pay an additional $70,000 in damages and legal fees. The two security goons received 6 months in jail for their role in the attack. Karen was permanently removed as HOA president, and a criminal record was placed on her file. When the verdict was read, Karen slumped in her chair, completely defeated. For the first time, she didn't have a smug comeback. She had lost everything: her position, her influence, her reputation, and worst of all, everyone in the courtroom knew it was entirely her fault. The fallout from the trial was immediate. Karen had not only lost the case, but she had become a public disgrace. News of the trial spread like wildfire across the community, and soon even the local media picked up the story. HOA president found guilty of harassment and conspiracy to commit assault, read one headline. Neighborhood tyrant taken down by private homeowner, read another. The story went viral on social media, and soon Karen's face was everywhere, for all the wrong reasons. Her once pristine reputation was shattered. No longer the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, she had become a joke, a cautionary tale of HOA overreach and unchecked entitlement. It didn't take long for Karen to feel the full weight of her public disgrace. She was immediately stripped of her HOA presidency. The remaining board members, eager to distance themselves from her actions, held an emergency vote and expelled her. She was hit with mounting debts. The court-ordered fines and legal fees wiped out her savings, forcing her to put her home on the market. Her social circle turned against her. Once admired, or at least feared, in the HOA community, she found herself completely ostracized. Neighbors who once tolerated her rule now avoided her at all costs. She was no longer the feared enforcer of community standards. She was a disgrace, a bitter reminder of what happens when someone lets power go to their head. When a for sale sign went up in her front yard a few weeks later, no one was surprised. Karen had no choice but to move, leaving behind the neighborhood she once controlled with an iron fist. Karen wasn't the only casualty of her downfall. With her trial exposing the shady tactics of the HOA, residents began to revolt. Dozens of homeowners filed lawsuits against the HOA, claiming years of unlawful fines and harassment. The local government launched an investigation into the HOA's financial records, exposing questionable transactions and misuse of funds. Several board members resigned, unwilling to deal with the growing backlash. Within 6 months, the once powerful HOA was on the verge of collapse. Monthly dues plummeted as homeowners refused to pay into a corrupt system. New leadership attempted reforms, but the HOA's reputation was beyond repair. A vote was held, and by an overwhelming majority, the HOA was officially dissolved. The organization that once controlled every aspect of the neighborhood was no more. As for Alex, with Karen gone and the HOA dismantled, his life finally returned to normal. His property remained exactly as he wanted it, gated, private, and completely free from interference. The days of HOA harassment, unwanted inspections, and ridiculous complaints were over. One afternoon, as he sat on his back porch with Sarah, watching the sun set over his land, she turned to him with a smile. "So, do you think we'll ever get another Karen?" Alex smirked, taking a sip of his drink. "If we do, they'd better be ready for a fight." Sarah laughed, leaning against him. "Good, because I kind of enjoyed watching you take them down." And with that, they clinked their glasses, enjoying the sweet victory of hard-earned peace. Never let an HOA or a power-hungry Karen think they own what isn't theirs, because some people fight back and win.
This story does not intend to judge any individuals involved.